Welcome. Please grab a seat. Wow, this was so fast. Usually I have to wait like 2-3 minutes walking around on stage. Now everybody's super quiet. That says something about how excited we all are to hear Ryan speak. All right, so I'm SC Moadi. I'm the founder of Products That Count. I'm very, very excited to welcome you here. Before I start, like, who's been here before? Who's been to a Products That Count event before? All right, about half the audience, and that's pretty typical. Who's been here like more than 5 times last year? Yeah, about like 10% of our audience. Yes, it's great. You guys are members that count. Thank you. Our members that count, just so you guys know, we do that every year. If you come to our programs 5 times out of the 12 we do, we give you some cool perks. We give you discounts to our events for the following year. We invite you to our holiday party. And we give you a cool membership card. Looks like this. Yes, it's super cool. So I'm very, very excited to welcome you. Products That Count is in San Francisco, where it originally started, thanks to the amazing Yelp team. And it's also now in San Jose, the first Wednesday of every month. In Seattle, the second Wednesday of every month. In New York, the third Wednesday of the month. San Francisco, the fourth. And I wish they were the fifth Wednesday, because we're looking at Boston, we're looking at LA soon. And we also have some events in London. So it's very special to be able to host those programs every month here at Yelp. I want to thank Yelp for being such a wonderful host. I want to thank the leadership of Yelp who is here. Vivek, if you guys are looking to work for Yelp, you should talk with him. By the way, they hire everything: product, analytics, design, and engineering. I also want to thank our other partners, Amplitude, which is a product analytics company. I'm very lucky to be an investor in Amplitude. If you're looking for ways to measure what's going on with your product, it's a great choice. mParticle, which is a data aggregation company. If you have lots of different sources of truth for your data, is also a great company to consider as a solution. Pragmatic Marketing, which provides training for product organizations, a very loyal partner of ours as well. You should check out their website. They have programs, training programs regularly in San Francisco and around the country. And then a new sponsor, partner, Autodesk, which just joined us, provides CAD services, design services for product folks. So those people, those partners, they make those programs possible. We're in a very lucky position to be able to choose them based on the needs that we hear from you guys. So when we say, we think this is a great company or a great partner, we're a nonprofit organization. We're not, trying to like make an extra buck or something. We're trying to provide a service to the organization and to the community. With that, I want to welcome Ryan. So Ryan and I got to know each other through a fellow investor, Mike Maples, whom I know and who has spoken here in the past. And we recently launched a program for our website and our blog, where we have some product experts who come in and write, like for 6 months, like a column on product. And Mike said, you really should get Ryan on this column because he's a great product thinker. And I really enjoyed getting to know his product thinking and his writing over the past 6 months. He talks a lot about storytelling. He talks a lot about why data is only like a small portion of the story. And I think that's a little bit of what you're going to talk about tonight as well, right? All right. So without further ado, welcome, Ryan. Looking forward to hear you.
Thanks. You can keep it. Yeah, I think you can keep it. Hello. All right. So great. Sound is working. We're rocking and rolling. I guess we don't need to see this slide. I'll try to keep it to about 20, 25 minutes or so. This is a totally brand new talk with a bunch of new things in it. So it's very possible this could be 10 minutes or 4.5 hours. So I'm not please feel free to leave if it gets that long. So I'm Ryan Walsh. There's my Twitter handle. If you want to get in touch with me, it's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. I'm currently a partner at Floodgate, which is an early stage investment firm. We do all different types of investments. Some of the past ones were Lyft, Twitter, Twitch. We did Okta. Did a bunch of others. And so it's been around as one of the earliest seed stage firms. In fact, Mike and Ann helped basically create the concept of seed stage investing back in 2005, 2006. And I was grateful to be brought on as their most recent investing partner about 2.5 years ago. But most of what people know me for, at least in the Valley, is my product work at Beats Music and at Apple for media. I'll get into a little bit more about those different products and how they interweave in the talk. But I was VP of music VP of products for Beats Music, and then I ran products. There's not really titles at Apple, so there's a lot of funny things about Apple. So I ran product for media. So that was music, movies, and television. So basically what that meant was the software side of Apple TV. So every time your MacBook Air can't connect to the Apple TV in a room during a presentation, call me or hit me up on Twitter. That's my fault. But also there is we also did Apple Music, which, probably the biggest product I worked on there. We launched iTunes in China, did the iTunes stores, ... And so I've been I guess to say, as a product person, I'm probably well qualified in the sense that I'm a failed engineer that wishes I was a designer. And so basically, my code was always algorithmically sound, but never really fast enough. I was always the last guy checking stuff in. So after a while, managers tend to notice that, and they're like, maybe you'd be really good on the front end, or maybe you'd be really good not on this team. And so I was surreptitiously removed from engineering roles. Even when I tried to commit code at Beats and Apple, they were like, how about you just stick to product? So I ended up starting doing product about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And I had no idea what I was doing. And eventually landed working with Beats. And we were very fortunate enough to sell the company to Apple. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are things that I've learned and some philosophies that I've garnered over the time of being a product manager, VP, director, whatever. And hopefully you'll get something good out of it. So yeah, I mentioned currently I'm investing at Floodgate. If you guys end up starting a business, you should send me an email or hit me up on Twitter, also SC. So the title of the talk is Beyond Data. And so basically, I'm a pretty straight shooter, as you'll find in this talk. So I basically think that data is totally a given. It's milquetoast at this point. Who cares? If you there's people that call me and they're like, hey, I'm really thinking about hiring a VP of product. So they send me this job description, which is the copy of every job description I've ever seen for a product manager. And it's always must be a data-driven person. I'm like, no kidding. Of course you're going to have to do that. So how do you differentiate a product thinker and someone who has a strategic edge versus someone who doesn't? I mean, a lot of people can look at mixed panel remote analytics and make a decision or give you an analysis. But I think there needs to be an advancement in the art beyond data. And so if you look at my phone currently, this is the third screen on my phone. It's a bunch of apps, all kind of in a giant noisy mess of an environment. Probably should delete Sprig. That doesn't exist anymore. But I like them. The environment that we have right now is just incredibly noisy. So when Yelp launched, it was a significantly quieter environment to gain traction, to gain attention from people. And that's really what we're trying to do, whether we're in the enterprise or we're in consumer or wherever we are. Like we're just basically trying to gain attention from people so that they will possibly give us a chance to prove that we have value. And the noise that we have right now with the number of apps and number of things vying for our attention and how products have evolved in their approach to getting that attention has just created a deafening sound. And products, and I would probably say most of the products that you work on are weaponized. The products that we have now are basically all philosophically aligned with this research that was done in the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford in like the late 2000s. And it's all about viral loops, using dopamine to get people to come back in, push notifications, all this stuff to like try to gain people's attention to shift their behavior. And in this fight for your attention, my attention, our attention, we're just continuing to add more and more things for people to pay attention to, more and more distractions. I mean, it's gotten so bad that now you see people like Chamath from Social Capital and Sean Parker going out and saying, Facebook is bad because it's so far down the path of being weaponized. So at Floodgate, we noticed that there was this intense agility that was continuing to grow. So it started with the lean startup about 10 years ago. And so this agility is great. I mean, it's what allows many of us to do our jobs. But that agility is also what's hurting us. It's that data-driven approach is limiting us and creating a blind spot. And my partner Mike put this together a little while ago, and I think it's the clearest example of sort of what the state of the world is in startups. It's that these lean startups are all going for this super high flexibility, very agile, mechanized, data-driven approach. Very good in some instances, but not the answer for everything. And then you have more traditional startups, like stuff like eBay and Amazon that came out in the 90s during the first wave. Those traditional startups, they were not at all about agile development, didn't even exist. They were about having a very strong sense of strategic rigor. So what does it mean to combine both of those two things? So we developed this concept of a prime mover. So there's a lot of different ways to take a look at that, but basically it just means that you're both flexible, like an agile process or like an agile team, and also having significant strategic rigor. And so in product, we need a strategic edge. So everybody around here, we're basically competing with each other. We're trying to get attention from the same people, especially if you're working in consumer. So what's your strategic edge? I felt like I needed to have one, and so that's why I developed this, storytelling. So I naturally kind of landed on this idea many, many years ago because I'm also like a wannabe theater nerd. So I do improv, I like The Moth, which is a storytelling series. I just like the idea of telling stories, and I think most people like stories. I mean, most podcasts are either like a group of people arguing over something or storytelling. So, I mean, it seems like I think it's a pretty strong signal that people find storytelling to be an engaging way of communication. So, one of the interesting things about storytelling is that is how, in human communication, you build trust. I'm not going to go into the deep psychological research behind it, but essentially, if you want to build trust one-on-one with another human being, telling stories and sharing stories is the best way to do that. And the best anecdotal evidence you can have for that is something actually from addiction. So like the 12-step model and the self-help groups that come together to help people recover from addiction. Basically what that is a little bit of like self-directed cognitive behavioral therapy and then storytelling. That's it. So when you build that trust and you have a relationship with someone or a brand or a piece of technology or something, that changes your attention. It can drive what you pay attention to day to day. Because it used to be, I want to switch somebody's attention from doing nothing to doing my thing. Now I have to pull the attention from somebody else because we're so heavily, stuck in such a heavy sea of noise that, we're going to need to pull somebody away as well as pull them towards us. And so I believe that through the art of storytelling, trust can be our strategic edge. And I think that the way that you express that in a product is by looking at your product not from a data-driven perspective. by looking at it from a narrative perspective. So, okay, great, like a bunch of like random theory. I believe that most of you are like, how can I apply this to my day-to-day product work? So let me walk you through a couple different things. So first, what do I think a product is? I think that probably another thing that I found in a lot of organizations that I've worked with is that product has a very different definition no matter where you work. Sometimes it's design and product, and sometimes it's marketing and design and product. Sometimes growth is in there, and occasionally engineering, and sometimes engineering is under product, and like it's a lot of different philosophies on how that works. But for me, product is just a promise and a story. So whatever you need to do in your organization to communicate a promise and to deliver a story for your users, your audience, that's what I think product is. So when I'm talking about it, I might go into marketing land, I might go into product land, I might go into design land, but that's what I'm thinking about when I think about product. So how do you develop a promise, right? So if we're going to use this art of storytelling, how are you going to take some sort of value and then present it to your users, your audience, and have them realize that you're worth their time and hopefully money and attention? So the question that I always start with when I'm working with a new team, new company, new product line is just asking, what will my audience trust me to do? What value will they find in us? And so the clearest thing that you can communicate to people around your value is something that feels very true. Like if you're trying to build a really, really big product, like we're going to work at Apple, everybody has to be aligned on the same vision and on the same, because there's a lot of independent decisions being made. And so you want to be able to share a common truth, an understanding of what the audience is going to feel in a particular situation. And I'll give you some concrete examples of this. But that's what we want to deliver a promise. And so when I am trying to think about what type of promise and how to brainstorm, I usually start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So in the beginning of Beats, we looked at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs quite often. So there's a ton of different things I could talk to you about this, but essentially, hopefully you're familiar with it a little bit, a basic psychological concept, but there's from the bottom to the top are the different levels of needs that you need to satisfy. Like you don't have your physiological needs satisfied, it's hard to be self-actualized. So a lot of what we find in social media products, they're kind of in the love and belonging space. Like their promise is all about connection and intimacy to some degree. A really good example of a product that utilizes this in a very strict way is Citizen. Citizen is a local social network that is completely derived from the concept of feeling unsafe. So they create a sense of feeling less than safe, and then it brings you back into the application over and over and over again. And what Citizen is basically a map-based app that tells you where crime is happening. So this is a quick example of what I mean when I say like you can use Maslow's hierarchy to generate a promise that will work. So when we were looking at designing Beats Music, so for everyone who is either a Spotify user and didn't pay attention for the 9 months that it was actually active, or never really knew what it was, we were looking more on the self-actualization end for designing the promise. And I'll explain sort of how we got there. But that's really more around creativity and spontaneity. So music as a cultural entity, it is best represented when it is paired with a right moment. Like, so for example, like the car ride home. Like if you had a great song that just hit you right at the right moment when you're driving in your car late at night on your way home, like that's a moment that's made better through music. That's a spontaneous moment. And so that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to really go super high level on our promise. And so the way that we looked at this like sort of self-actualization was really more around the artists. So if there were more moments like that in the world, right? If there was more music being enjoyed, how would that represent? How would that impact the state of music as culture? And so what we decided to do was like sort of frame our thinking around the creator economy. We thought the creator economy was basically dying in 2012. And so we then decided, well, actually, I shouldn't say decided, we then realized that in a few years from some analysis, maybe about 10 or so years, the economic decision to being an artist for a kid in their bedroom when they were 15 or 16 years old would be completely untenable. Not difficult like it is today, but completely untenable. YouTube and Spotify, with their free tiers, had basically driven the price of a recorded song down to zero. And that, I mean, not just that, but piracy as well. And so we were living in an environment where we thought, well, everyone has access to every song that they want basically for free. Music is now the value of removing ads, not the value of actually listening to songs. So what value, what promise could we possibly make that would be strong enough to pull people away from essentially free and piracy? And so this access-driven music model was a big barrier to trying to present a product that we thought would further the creator economy, that would then make it a viable option for the kid in the bedroom when they're 15 or 16 years old, like making the decision to be an artist and maybe not necessarily being an engineer or a product manager. And so what we came up with is that the thing that the music industry did well that wasn't happening anymore was curation. Like, there was no one that was providing the service of making an album great, because albums had basically been turned into individual songs that could be bought a la carte by iTunes. So there really was no curatorial or storytelling element to music. And with Spotify being 30 million songs at a search bar back in 2012, we thought we had a strategic edge, maybe a nice brand, and this was going to be how we were going to do it. So that was the philosophy from day one, before there was any design or anything, is that we will provide curation, and that's what people will know us for. So if you're going to provide curation, you need people to trust you. And we had to do everything possible to get people to believe that we were actually expert musicians providing a real service, not just, another app listing a bunch of songs. We had to feel different. And so you can't feel different by measuring a bunch of different things and experimenting your way A/B style into a market. You have to have a point of view before you launch. And so what we did is we decided to create our own voice, our own tone of voice as one of the first things we did. So most of the time, content strategy comes super late, but we did it first. And the idea was we needed to have a way that people understood us almost as a personified being. And one of the elements that we looked at was how we could be authentic, how we could be true. And so we made sure that everyone in the Beats Music organization understood what the tone of voice was for the application, for our marketing, for how we communicated internally, everything. And that everyone understanding the tone of voice within each of the departments, customer service all the way to QA, we were able to have a unified way of speaking to each other and also speaking to our audience to sort of start to develop that trust. So the first point is having a singular tone that reinforces trust is super helpful. So these are some of the values that we came up with early in the design process. And we use these values to then drive product principles and things of that nature. So we started with the tone. These are the things that we wanted people to think about us. These are like sort of the sub-elements of the promise. And then we, from that, created what was the brand promise and the product promise almost before we did any interface design, which was music that's always right for you with a CTA of just hit play. And so it's music, it's a music service that's always right. So it's pointed, it's contextual, it's timely, and it's for you. So it's personalized. And so basically we collapsed all the things we wanted people to believe, and this is what we told them we would do. All you had to do was hit play and you would get music that's right for you. That was our promise. And so when we sold the company and went into Apple, we still kept the same philosophy, even though the product and the tone and the way that it was approached changed. I mean, this was the lead image on the Apple website when we launched Apple Music, and that is the actual kid in the bedroom that we were talking about. So we held on to that same structure, that same promise structure, even through a complete redesign and re-architecture in Apple. So that's how strongly we felt about it. And so from that promise, music that's right for you, always right for you, just hit play. Our product story followed. So this was more into the nitty-gritty about how we actually designed the products. And I'm going to sort of flip back and forth a little bit and show you how we actually went about the design process, how we thought through the storytelling of the application. 5 minutes. I'm going to do this so fast. So how do we develop the product story? So we asked this question: how will our audience learn to trust in you? This is exactly how we'd sort of develop a storyline. So first, you figure out the promise, then you figure out the journey that the users are going to take to continue to have reinforced trust in that promise. So what does that really end up being? It's the sum of all the audience experiences. So every interface, every design element, every time that somebody interacts with your product in a brand exchange, like in marketing, on Facebook, in an ad, anything. And I also believe that product is not just the application that you use. It's from the first time somebody realizes that you exist until they decide whether you're worth it or not. And so a great example of building trust in a storyline over multiple products over multiple times is Apple Pay. I won't spend too much time on it, but Apple Pay was known and clear to everybody well before it actually went live. And Apple did such an amazing job of starting with Passbook, getting people to put low trust items into a wallet, then building the trust, getting people to put medium trust items into a wallet, and then getting you to put your payment information in, and then adding biometrics to be able to allow you to do secure payments and feel safe and trusted, and now Face ID. So it's pretty remarkable how quickly they got people to change their behavior and trust something like a phone, in which no one would have done that 5 years ago, or maybe 7 years ago now. So back to Beats. So remember, curation was our promise. And so we believe that the way that you could represent curation was almost like a skeuomorph, like curation being conversation. So when you go talk to a record store, I mean, nobody goes to a record store anymore. I guess they're cool again, but when you go to a record store and you talk to the clerk, you basically say to them, hey, I'm listening to this. I'd like to hear some more stuff like this, right? And so we thought that we could try to create a bunch of different conversations like that and represent them in the application. And that's how we created sort of a narrative arc within Beats. And then I'll show you how it transferred into Apple. So a lot of people have seen this, even if I've never actually played with the app. But basically, we literally made the onboarding a conversation. We told people exactly what we wanted. Tell us what music you're into, and we'll find stuff that's right for you. It could not be any bludgeoningly clearer what we're going to do for you. And that's what we did through this interface. We basically asked people to give us some genres they like, some artists that they like. We put a little funny screen in that pretended like we were doing some magic, which we really wasn't that magical. And then we would give you playlists that were in that tone of voice. And so the idea was that we architected a conversational, I have no better word for it than skeuomorph, a conversational paradigm here to then deliver on this promise. And if this playlist recommendations weren't dead on, if you didn't immediately trust them, we lost. So that's how we measured the success of the entire app. And most of the people that had great experiences here stuck with us. People that didn't, left. And so now the same thing is in Apple. So if you actually use Apple Music, which in San Francisco, people under the age of 35, it's not the majority. So the interface is still the same. It's still the exact same thing that we're doing there. So that conversational element is now been used by 35, 40 million people. So as I mentioned, the product model conversation. So a personal conversation. So one way to look at curation is saying, I want to speak to a music expert. That's what For You was. Playlists and albums recommended seemingly by a human music expert, but largely by curatorial algorithms. In Apple, it ended up being For You, so basically the exact same thing. They added new playlists like the algorithmic new music mix. And they still kept the same, different tone of voice, as you can see, but they still kept the same idea of going after a particular feel for the playlist and the copy that sort of continued to deliver on the promise of that right music for you right now. The thing that's also interesting to note about Apple Music's design is that there is no design to it. Like there's only content. That's it. I mean, it's even white. Like there's just absolutely nothing to it. It's just content and dividers. So this was the player from Beats Music. The thing that's interesting about this is we had a love and hate button. And so that was a way for us to get contextual conversation happening within the actual player. So if you really liked something, you could tell us right then and there that you liked it, and that was all you had to say. In Apple, we got it pulled into a sub-menu, but still same thing. It's the idea of you being able to have a conversation contextually. This was something that didn't make it over to Apple in its own proper form, but it was the sentence. It was an idea of you creating your own radio station based on a sentence. And so you would choose like at work, escaping my boo, and vintage soul and funk. It was a cool product, but you're asking someone to do 4 drop-down menus in a mobile app. It was like, what were we thinking? Like everybody was like, I'm at work, and they're like, oh man, this is too much work, I'm out. They just moved over to the next thing. And so I loved it. It was really cool, but not a lot of people used it not as much as I'd hoped. So the way that the social conversation is happening in Apple Music is the friends are listening to and then sort of recently played. So very similar to what Spotify's doing with a slightly different touch. And then we also added radio, which is the sort of the shared experience of the past when everybody would listen to the same song in their car stereos at the same time. And then so having a cultural conversation. So you have one-on-one with an expert. You have one-on-one with your friends or one to your few with your friends. But what about what's happening in the zeitgeist? So we created a highlights section that was essentially the exact same sort of copy, approach, et cetera. And the idea was, so if you wanted to find out just what was happening in your country at the moment, that's where you would find it out. So, that got moved over into Browse and Apple Music. We had the notion of curators. And so that was like bringing other personalities and letting them express themselves within the application. So we made it robust enough so that you could actually have other types of conversation, but within the same framework of sort of building trust within the app. And then there's not that much of that still in Apple Music, but the sort of the curators have been all bundled under genres. So before I get into this, it's only one more slide or two. Let's see. Basically, the entire design process of designing Beats was around utilizing the promise of trying to deliver the right music for you right now as the truth that we were trying to communicate, and then layering on top of that a bunch of interfaces, designs, product experiences, conversations that would get you to continue to believe that that was true. And so when we were in data mode, when we were looking at subscription and LTV and what conversion was like, largely we found, in fact, I don't think there was an instance in which we didn't find it, that that trust and what we felt and we predicted would be high trust experiences, if a user experienced it, it correlated with subscription. And so we firmly believe, and designed Apple Music in the same way because of it, that utilizing the ideas of trust and storytelling is a key and a critical way to think about designing products that consumers are going to use. And so one of the ways when we designed these products, we're like, well, how the hell do you determine whether you're doing this right or not? And so we came up with a really easy question to ask when we were not looking at data to make product decisions, when we were just trying to be more qualitative about it. And that's simply when we had a problem or a debate, we just asked, are we building or breaking trust in this particular situation? So if we knew the promise, if we knew exactly where we were at on this user journey, on the path to building trust in that promise, we would be able to then communicate and have a good debate about whether we were actually building or breaking trust. And that's largely how a lot of the design decisions end up getting made. And so that's pretty much it. Sorry for going over a little bit. I appreciate the time from SC and for Sarah, who I have not met yet, who's awesome, works with SC. And I really, really appreciate you all coming out. I hope that you were able to glean something helpful throughout this little talk, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Ryan, just repeat the question when you get it.
What's that?
Just repeat the question when you get it.
Oh, yeah, sure. I will repeat the question when I get it.
Can you talk a little bit more about the sentence? How did you think users were going to respond to it? And apart from the navigation challenge of it being a pain to get to, why do you think people didn't use it?
The question was about the sentence and why, aside from the navigation challenge, why do we think people didn't use it? Well, first, I think this goes into sort of that are we building or breaking trust question. One of the ways that you can break trust is by injecting an enormous amount of cognitive load almost unintentionally because you feel like you're being creative. That's definitely something I have done a bunch of times incorrectly. And I think that, we kind of got, it was a bunch of artists working on this thing. We all really felt like, yeah, we know what's good. This is good. This is really cool. Well, we understood it. Well, guess what? We hadn't really tested it. And so calling it the sentence is cognitive load. 4 drop-down menus to figure out, even if they looked cool, to create a radio station was extra cognitive load. The promise that we had was just hit play, with the exception of the sentence. With the sentence, hit this button, then this button, then this button, then this button, and then, if you understand what we mean, then hit play. Got it. It was just not it was completely antithetical to our whole process if we really step back and thought about it for a minute. I think that's probably why it didn't work as well. We'll just keep going down the line.
If more and more products are becoming weaponized and fighting for everyone's attention, do you see a shift in the user to begin to pull away from that, or are they just going to keep going to whatever's most weaponized product at the time?
I think we're. This is almost like it's like a sociological question, but I think we are seeing, in different ways based on different generations, people thinking and reacting to this problem. Do you like it when you're stuck on your phone all day? Does it feel good? No. Doesn't. I don't know. If it does, come find me. I'd like to give you a job being a user tester. But I think we're feeling it, and so we're just reacting to it in different ways based on where we're at. Look at Arianna Huffington has her approach. She's doing consulting and doing, trying to get people to, change their behavior with phones. Tristan Harris, Time Well Spent, same thing, or different approach, but same overall concept. And I think that as we become more and more digital native and really even internet native, as we continue to grow older and new generations come in behind us, I think that the way that we design products will change, and I feel like people are already starting to consider it. I think that one of the main reasons why you haven't seen another major social network break since Snap is that it's what else are you gonna do? We're already hitting our brains with severe nuclear grade dopamine with Instagram. So it's I don't know how much, how much more rat in a cage do we need to get? I just don't think it's not possible to get stronger in that way, so it's got to be something new. Yes?
So you talked about building and breaking trust as a way to evaluate decisions. Does that ever come into conflict with financial decisions? So thinking about things like ads on Facebook or Instagram, and now that consumers are having reactions to this going overboard.
Yeah.
Is that breaking building trust, but at the same time, is that in conflict with financial challenges that revenue targets you have to hit?
Right. So the biggest trust break that you can do is inserting ads into consumer product. It's it's very clearly defined. Everybody understands it. It's I got to use this thing and there was no ads, and then one day I wake up and there's ads. Man, that sucks. Don't like it as much. Super clear. Everyone can understand that. But I think that you have to do it at some point. So there's a lot of different ways that people have approached something like that specific example, like making the ads more native to the content type and making them more targeted in a lot of different areas. But in terms of having to make decisions when to break trust, you have to do that. But here's my question. Like, how often are you doing that and just not thinking about it, just not saying anything about it, just doing it almost instinctually, or without consideration of what the real impacts are going to be, or maybe almost even dishonestly? Like, if you just ignore the fact that you're doing it and just be like, oh, well, hopefully it's fine. Like, if not, we'll just A/B test it out. Like, that's kind of not a great way to approach like clearly impacting your user base, even if it is for a financial reason. I think that this, like, the general framework and the idea could be applied to making a bunch of money too. Does that answer your question? I'll repeat the questions next time. I forgot it.
Yep. Do you think the framework around narrative and trust you walk through with Apple and B2C experiences also applies to B2B products? If there are any key differences, maybe talk about your portfolio companies. We'd love to hear about how B2B product experiences are different.
Right, and so his question is, how does all this crazy stuff work in B2B, if at all, and some examples. So, I mean, Slack is essentially IRC, so I think there's an example, not in a portfolio, unfortunately. But so I think Slack is a good example of a very consumerized enterprise product. So rather than just default to the obvious consumer example, I'll say that enterprise is a special case of consumer in which the needs of the audience are super clearly defined and the motivations are pretty limited. I mean, when you're an employee, you know, most of your employees are either motivated by personal development, the mission, career, money, power. What else? It's like, so you basically know at any given moment at work, or maybe they're motivated to not act. Like, they don't want to work, they don't want to be there, they don't like it, you know, some other way. So like, generally, your motivators in a work environment are much clearer. And so that's why enterprise products can kind of, quote unquote, get away with things that consumer products don't, because it's part of the day job. So I think that if you can apply the principles in the same way that you would a consumer experience. I actually think, I mean, what ends up happening in enterprise a lot of times, especially as products get older, is that it becomes like a sea of buttons. It's just amazing how many buttons you can have nested within other buttons. And so, like, I think that, you know, one of the ways to consider, you know, like super feature creep and like the button farm is to consider like really what you need, like how to prioritize your interfaces, how to make the workflows a lot smoother. Because you're not going to get a lot of data that says, well, this workflow doesn't work if someone's forced to do it for their job. And so you want to have a pleasant experience and people to like what you're doing. So, you know, I think that the same principle can apply. Yes?
Organizationally, how you see this working well and working well. Like, you could imagine this being almost the founder's statement, vision.
Yeah. Yeah, he's asking about how do you make this happen organizationally. So not a huge fan of like direct like sort of day-to-day, you know, let's check in all the time management style. This is not who I am. I think that this is what I can tell you worked. There's a lot of stuff I've seen that didn't work, but what worked was when everyone at Beats Music all had a clear understanding of what the vision was in a language and a frame that was appropriate for their job. So if like everybody's shooting towards the same goal, and you as the manager or as the director, whoever is doing the hiring, if you're confident in your hiring, they should then be able to do independent work, assuming that you as the director or manager can clear a path for them to do it politically, creatively, you know, logistically. So basically, it's on you to hire well, define and communicate the vision in a context that makes sense for the people on your team, or not on your team, anywhere in the company, and then clear the path for them to be able to do their work. And I feel like no matter what the structure is of a particular company, if a product-focused organization or a product organization does those things, even if they have no direct reports or have no power in the organization whatsoever, trust will be built internally, and then you'll be able to execute in this way. Does that help? Mm-hmm.
How do you go about answering that question?
Debate, a lot of debate. Yeah. So it's kind of like, so all right, so you're sitting there and you're going back and forth on a bunch of different, like 2 different design choices. Like, so for Apple Music, do we put friends that are listening to directly underneath it, or directly underneath the algorithmic playlist, or do we put it 6 layers down? What do we put in the order? And so I think you can have a pretty healthy debate on what the clearest representation of building trust in the promise in that particular conversation, as long as everybody is aligned, but that's how you're thinking. And so, if you are, maybe another way to think about it is, data is one way to have a debate. Trust is another way to have a debate. That neither of them are necessarily right, but they're just different ways to look at the same problem. Does that help?
When considering successful products, do you think the majority of them either fulfill needs or create new needs?
That is a really great question. The question is, do I feel like most products do I feel like more products create needs or fulfill existing needs? I think the most successful products fulfill needs no one knew they had. But that I feel like is very true. Because they emerge into new categories and they create new markets. But I think it's a really tough question to answer for a lot of different reasons. I'm not going to be here for 20 minutes, so we should talk off afterwards. But I would say I believe that more products fulfill existing needs because more people are motivated by pain than they are for search. I can't end on pain, all right? Yes?
Self-actualization part as a kind of aim for your promise.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering how did you come up with the curation for...
Yeah, I kind of like whizzed through that part. Yeah, so how did we come up with curation as the promise? So, like, let's just look at it from a strict market perspective. 2012, the subscription services that were available globally were Rhapsody, Spotify. You could technically say YouTube was just a free service with no subscription yet. Not much else. And so, and piracy. And so if you used any of those services, there's like notion of like these like kind of cool playlists and whatnot. It didn't really exist. I think the best Spotify had to offer at that point was a playlist they called Mood Booster, which I always thought was kind of hilarious because I was like, what if I'm in a terrible mood? Does it like boost me into being worse? We just basically saw that we could clearly see that there was no curation, and that the idea of the curated album had just basically gone out of existence. And so it had worked in music before, so we believed it could work again. And we also saw that there was so much noise in trying to find any song that's good when you suddenly have access to all of them. Like that nobody had solved the discovery problem. We thought that we would just do it with human beings. Because we just thought human beings would understand the emotion behind music better than a computer or a search function would. Cool. Oh, I can't see. If you have a question, scream it out.
Question. So I realize the thrust of your talk is about making product decisions qualitatively rather than quantitatively. But I'm curious as to when you talk about like increasing or breaking trust, did you ever have a way to measure or validate like what's the baseline of how much users trust your product and whether anything you shipped like affected that negatively or positively? Like, do you have a way of validating that?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of where you have to combine the qualitative and the quantitative. So it's kind of interesting. One of the things I didn't end up writing, at least not yet, for the Products That Count blog is how do you actually like put a number to trust? Which basically you can look at the user journeys. Oh God, what is it called? A sunburst? You know, like a sunburst graph where you see like everybody sees the first screen and then 45% people choose this and then 10% choose this and whatnot. And you can kind of look at and see what the user journeys are that people take. You can correlate that into to likelihood of like what you consider to be your like trust conversion point. So it can be one factor like subscription, or it could be two-factor like subscription and retention for 30 days, or multi-factor. So it's subscription, retention for 30 days, use 5 of the last 7 days, et cetera. So you can quantify what you believe trust is. You just have to do it in like multiple factors. And so what we would do is then just correlate like what was happening on the user journey side, and then what those people, if they did that thing, if they went through that journey and they had that experience, what was their correlation to the success metrics we were looking for? Does that answer your question? One more. You're the lucky last one.
Okay, that's it. I thought it was a very unique case that happened here with being acquired by Apple.
It was more than unique.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also thinking when I build a product, this is an opportunity to get it reviewed by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So when this whole process happened, there's some big insights where you said, I wish I would have thought about it when you talked to the Apple guys, or when the Apple guys said, like, the other way around, I wish we would have thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have a couple of examples? Did this happen, or?
I'm not sure if I totally understand exactly what you're saying. So the question was, were there instances in terms of the integration of the two teams between Apple and Beats?
Yeah, what were the big insights of like, I wish I would have thought about it. Like, a good idea you had that Apple didn't have, or that Apple had and you didn't have.
Yeah, it's funny. Ideas are an interesting currency at Apple. I would say this: the things that I'll just tell you exactly what I learned. Here's what I learned. If you get acquired by a big company, the most important thing that you can do is keep your team steady. And I think that there was no product decision or insight that I got around how like great our products could be that was in any way more powerful than the experience of day-to-day understanding my own personal shortcomings in not being able to provide stability for the organization as they were transitioning. And I think that anything that was blocked in the process of converting from Beats into Apple and then converting the product was not really about ideas. It wasn't like, well, like, oh, Jimmy Iovine or Trent Reznor had this crazy insight, or Eddie Q had this great insight. It was more like we all knew that we were great experts in our own individual ways, and the things that blocked us were not ideas. It was just the machinations of integrating into a new company that was massive. I don't think anybody realized how hard it was going to be when we did it. Yeah.
Ryan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, yeah. Oh, thanks.
All right, so that was awesome. One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the talk is one thing that makes Products That Count unique is that we have people like Ryan who put together a whole new talk with their insights and lesson learned. And every talk, we ask our speakers to share something unique about their experience that they've never shared before. And about half of them do what Ryan did, which is I'm just going to create a whole new talk with all my insights. Next month, we have a speaker who's going to take a similar approach. We have the former VP of product from Netflix, who's going to talk about how you go about building a brand like Netflix when you're in a product organization. So how do you partner with different parts of the organization, like marketing and so on. The talk is on March 28th. You also all have in your inbox right now a survey. So we treat our programs the way I used to treat my product back when I was at Facebook. And so we measure the Net Promoter Score of every single evening. So your feedback is super valuable. We use it to improve every single talk we do. And I would appreciate just a minute of your time to fill it out. I also now want to invite those of you who want to share a shout out to come over here. So shout out is typically a very popular time where you can talk about your hiring, your startup, jobs you're looking for, whatever it is. So if you have something you'd like to share, this is your 10 seconds of fame. So It's always hardest to hit the first person to get up. So please come over here. And I have some goodies for you, the first few people who are going to be talking. So please line up here, right here. There you go.
Hi, my name is Philippa. I'm a junior at Babson College, and I'm a student working on actually a research project right now. We're specifically consulting for a company called Humanize, and we're looking to do user interviews and user visits with people who have either worked in the M&A space, either on the finance side, or have recently gone through some sort of a mergers and acquisition transition, and we're looking at improving the post-merger integration process.
Anybody else? Come on. Come on, please line up. We're not going to do it this way.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rene Kolga. I work for an awesome cybersecurity startup down in Santa Clara, and we're looking for a super talented demand gen person right now. So if you are one or you know of anyone who's looking, find me after this. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay. All right. Well, so there's another half hour for you to network, have some pizza, enjoy, and please leave Yelp clean at 9 o'clock. Bye. See you next month.